This will be 944B of the series. And as I said earlier, this would be the hardest way to approach quantum mechanics, and now I am not so sure any longer about the book Quantum Enigma. And this is promising in two ways. First, I already know Quantum Enigma does only work to a certain extent. It makes you curious, but it blocks out understanding. So it does a good thing, and I always been happy with the one thing. And somewhere I understood that it would have been better if I could have the whole thing. Both a sort of surprise thing and an understanding, but Quantum Enigma won't give that to you. It is too strict, the jump is too big, it's impossible to do. And it's very similar to making a language too complicated at the very beginning, like in the example of Arabic. It will actually postpone learning, because just by thinking it's so difficult, you will block out all understanding. And this is more or less what is done in the book Quantum Enigma. And that is also true for quantum reality, quantum creativity, sorry. The two grandest books in the subject, according to many people who will be looking into these things. Quantum mechanics, for laymen you could say, but they defy understanding in a most decisive way. And it doesn't lead into an easiness of understanding. Here, in the Susie Froebel model, we get a much softer and lenient approach. An approach that is not as strict, you could say, or defies the possibility of getting closer. Yeah, you could say that. It is not an absolute stop for thinking. It is more of you go in it little by little, and you can start with things that are much more neutral. You can actually start by knowing, you start with language, you can start with any subject, and you sort of ease into it, because fractality is something of a joy. It is not harsh, doesn't cut you off from reality in the same way. It rather opens up little by little, and you don't have these tough measures on how you can sort of get into knowing. This is an invitation to understand the world in a broader way, where you can start with the understanding you already have. Whereas quantum reality, in the sense of quantum creativity, the book, and Quantum Enigma, just puts you in a very awkward spot. You are all of a sudden stranding in a place where you don't want to be, where there is nowhere to go, so to speak. Either you go up, you go down, it won't take you anywhere. And you get frustrated and you approach the subject more and more. In this case, fractality eases you up to understanding, and you don't have to make this, I would say, almost impossible jump into Schrödinger's cat. An example, as I mentioned before, was constructed to be as stark a contrast that was humanly possible. That was the idea. You don't have to make an absolute break with your own thinking. You start with what you have, you start with the knowing you have, and you see what you can gain in that knowing already. And therefore, this absolute cut is no longer necessary to the same extent. And I'm also starting to think that this Schrödinger cat example could incite fear within the subject who's approaching the matter. And that in that way it could be even more troublesome. It's just too stark a thing and it becomes spooky. Fractality shows that the ordinary living ways is where you start. And that by easing the fractality up more and more, you can little by little and in slow way approach quantum mechanics in a more balanced way. And you learn to realize the balance in itself is the understanding. It is not that your bodily understanding somehow is separated from your mental, intellectual, or what have you understanding. It is part and parcel of the very same thing. And it works together to make an understanding that is useful in all and every situation, bar anyone. And I think this is the gallantry of Susie Froebel, because now when I started to understand time better, I realize this all of a sudden makes it possible for me to ask questions. So I needed, like the Rotterdam example, just smack on, I get the information, that wakes my curiosity, and then later I can understand all of a sudden that why question was sort of blocked out by knowledge itself. Because I already had been to Rotterdam, I read about Rotterdam, it put some interest in my head, and that very knowledge blocked out the question automatically. It wasn't not an intention from my side, it was not an unconscious intention either, it was knowledge itself. A knowledge that was maybe a little bit preemptive, one could say, came too soon, too quickly, and I needed to get the knowledge little by little. See it this way, if I would have approached Rotterdam as, for instance, most mariners did in the olden days, as their first or second destination at a big seaport, they would see the boats coming in from the Danube, and they would slowly realize this is a harbor that goes both ways, both from the sea to the sea, from the river to the river. And it's this amazing system that needs to be experienced. But because I have this more distant understanding, distance, by the way, is not a wrong anymore, not in Susie Froebel. This is just one take on reality. But because the distance should maybe not have been in this specific spot of knowledge, that automatically blocked out. So my understanding blocked out the possibility of a question coming up. So understanding in itself, without any intention from anyone, from any person or any living being anywhere, here, there, or wherever you can think, it is not something that comes in actuality. It is that you just happen to understand something prematurely, and that will block out further questions automatically, because the subject doesn't come into, they sort of fit into each other and they block out everything. And I would say this is once more an indication that the Susie Froebel method is necessary. It's not an optional way. It is the better, softer, easier, more coming from reality as it is perceived by the ordinary man. There, very vivid, absolutely just, nothing wrong system will sort of little by little ease up understanding and let you come to the deepening thinking that leads you into a deeper understanding. It makes triple sense somehow. You need to start where you are at, and you need to acknowledge the knowledge you have within yourself. And I would say this is possibly once more letting the subject into the question, letting the subject be part of what you are actually doing in a most definite and directed way, without going too far away from the subject and still being, so to speak, within it. So fractality is a way of seeing reality as being made up of somehow maybe smaller building blocks, but more fractal building blocks. And these building blocks, they do help you to come to a deeper, more enriching and fruitful understanding. And you become, with your body, more fractal, and then you relax. Balance itself is a fractality. Taking in the surrounding space makes you more complex fractally, because taking in space is an invitation to fractality, complexity, and that in itself makes up the stability, the resilience of the chaotic system. The chaotic system becomes stable once you take in the surrounding, and when you do that with time as well, that becomes stronger, not so much dependent on polarities, because polarities is more of a sort of lack of something. You don't have enough broad base in time and space, and then you automatically become more polar, and then you automatically discern, maybe a little bit too sharply, between what is open understanding and what is a more closed understanding. And this is something that can be experienced, and this could be used to great extent in the book. And it could be both physical practices that invites a broadening, and this is how this broadening starts with knowledge as well. You start with the knowledge you have. You understand little by little that it's more fractal than absolutely polarized, and then you slowly develop. Slowly, and you need not to shock the system, almost like the Schrödinger cat is a slap over the face. This is the soft and nice and lenient and flexible approach, and no longer do we have the same need of absolutes. We can ease into them. We can relax into them, because otherwise attention will start within your head, and that will itself defy new knowledge, will stop new knowledge. Like this sharpness of argumenting, attacking, defending, that automatically makes the procedure less fractal. You have this antagonism, maybe in the Greek agora square, that is too sharp. This very sharpness blocks out the possibility of a broader understanding in itself. That already becomes like too points pointing to each other, and the area, whether it's knowledge, time or space, becomes very, very small by itself. And I think that is a very grand way of understanding. It's a needy, sharp point in time that is this metaphysics of presence. But you should not criticize it. You should open it up where you are, and making those pointy, sharp things that point to each other from the subject side and the objective or external or the exogenous time, that softens up, and more things can all of a sudden come into the picture. Now, this really helps with time, actually. The nesting becomes more possible also, because fractality is a constant nesting, and this is very equivalent of a broadening of the now time. Yeah, I'm really happy with this approach. It sounds very promising. I'll get back with later episodes here. And I say thank you for now, and I wish you a very pleasant afternoon. Do enjoy your time, and remember, there is always plenty more time wherever you go about, just as there is more knowledge and also more space. Bye bye.